everybody. This is the Progress Report. Yet again, we're still on the air. That would be me, Bob Backus, and my dear friend Mike Farley, who's with us via Skype as he has been for quite a while now. And this is the last show for the month of February. Can you believe it, Mike?
Short month.
We have less than 20 days to go till spring, and today kind of felt spring-like. So it was really nice. And today we are going to be featuring another Mike Whitten, the Executive Director of the Manchester Transit Authority, because it's an issue I think that is a concern to many of us here in the city. And certainly to me, I really am interested in transportation issues. I just couldn't be more enthusiastic about, the corridor rail project and getting passenger rail back here. Maybe I'll ask Mike Whitten about that too. But we want to talk.
To, Bob.
What?
I plan to.
Okay.
It is, after all, the Manchester Transit Authority, not the Manchester Bus Authority, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Mike. So that's our subject today. And as always, we hope that we'll have our viewers call in with their questions or comments, and the number's right up there on the screen, of course, 640-3091. We love to have participation from our viewers, and we treat them with kindness. We really do. And so if people want to join us, we hope they will. But we have an interesting guest today with an interesting subject, and that is the furnishment of transportation, not only to the citizens of Manchester, but the citizens of many parts of southern New Hampshire. Something I was not as aware of as I should have been, and maybe you won't be either. But that's what we're going to talk about, and how our transit system is doing and meeting the challenges it faces, which include a lot of challenges. I'm sure revenues are a problem, many issues, and it particularly as we face the greatest pandemic we've had in over 100 years in this country, the COVID pandemic, which has affected every aspect of our lives, and I'm sure it's affected the Manchester Transit Authority as well. So, Mike, thanks for coming down and joining us. You told me you've been the executive director of the authority since 2010.
Yeah,
11 years on the job and still going strong. And I know from your prior appearance here, which was quite a while ago, that you're a guy who came up right through the ranks, starting as a driver for one of our city buses, right to the top spot, and running this essential community service, the Manchester Transit Authority. And by the way, very unique, maybe not totally unique, but it's quite unique in Manchester. The Manchester Transit Authority not only provides our city bus services around the city, and we'll learn many other places as well, but also our school buses for the Manchester School District, all run out of the Manchester Transit Authority. It takes care of every part of the school district's bus needs, from the maintenance of the buses, the acquisition of the buses, to even the hiring the drivers of our school buses. Positions are open, apparently, folks. So, Mike, thanks for coming in. We're really glad to have you with us. I think the thing everybody's really, how can we not start with this? The impact of COVID-19 on all of us has been just overwhelming. It dominates every conversation. Everybody I talk to now, when's your appointment for a vaccine? Have you got your vaccine? I mean, this is just what it's all about everywhere. How has this affected the Manchester Transit Authority, and how have you overcome the challenges it may present?
Yeah, I mean, the impacts are large. I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to getting past this. So it started last year.
We all are, Mike.
Right?
Believe
Hear,
me.
hear.
So we ended up, like every transit system in New Hampshire, we suspended service last April for a couple of months through June. We did that so that we had time to order and retrofit the buses with barriers for the drivers, put sanitizer in the buses, order foggers so that we could go through, clean the buses periodically throughout the day. We wanted to make sure that we were able to open and provide the service, but do so in a way that was safe. And I'm very proud of the fact that here we are 13 months later, and we have not had one case of COVID transmitted through the transit system, not to a driver or a passenger. So that's something
really
we take a lot of pride in.
remarkable achievement. You deservedly should be proud of that. Mike, go ahead.
No, I echo what you just said, Bob. That is absolutely fantastic, because that is a situation that is a prime transmitter. You have people in an enclosed space for an extended period of time, especially your drivers. And the fact that they've been able to take the steps necessary to prevent transmission that's extraordinary. I would have
It's a real
expected,
accomplishment, Mike.
Yeah.
you know, that you had low numbers, or that, you know, we were able to keep it, you know, down to a point where we could keep the buses running, but to have none at all, that is just extraordinary.
That's really an
and
remarkable
the community
achievement.
should really be aware of that when they're thinking about using the transit system.
Yeah. So you've talked about some of the reasons you were able to adjust to this and get back. What was the effect of the COVID on your ridership? Did demand increase or did it disappear?
Oh, it plummeted. So when we brought service back last June, we were down between 85 and 90% across the board. At this point, most of the runs are back to about half. The outliers we have are the ones that serve the college campuses, because the students aren't back yet.
Down.
So until the students come back, things like Route 5 and 11 are still gonna be underperforming. The one kind of bright spot we've seen is route number 8. That's the South Willow. So we went forward with a plan last fall to double the frequency. That was something that was planned to be done pre-COVID anyway. The bus now runs every 30 minutes instead of every 60.
This goes down to the Mall of New Hampshire?
Yeah, right down the South Willow corridor, down Union Street. And even in the middle of the pandemic, through the surge and everything, we are beating the ridership numbers pre-COVID.
Really?
So it's I think, been a
So
great
people
proof
want
of
to
concept.
shop. They may
Yeah.
be facing COVID, but they want to shop.
And it shows you how
listen,
important
can
it
I
is
jump
that the
in there?
route be
Because,
convenient.
I remember our last conversation on the show, Bob, and we talked about frequency.
Yep.
And I remember that was something that Mike said that we had to look into. And I wonder if you could just take a minute, kind of unpack this a little bit. How do you think the increase in frequency has contributed to the fact that this particular route, of course, you have the destinations that people want to go to. Let's give that as a given. But doesn't the fact that it's more convenient, that it's more frequent, do you get an exponential effect out of that?
Absolutely. We know that the convenience was our main barrier. You know, the fare is only $2. Most of our passengers qualify for some level of half fare, so they're riding for $1. It was that need to take an hour in between each bus. So even if you wanted to run and just grab some milk and bread, you're going to be in the store for 5 or 10 minutes. You were then going to wait for 50 minutes for that bus to come back around again. So having every 30 minutes just lets you do those quick errands. It lines up better with work schedules, so people aren't there half an hour before their shift starts. Lets people get to places like daycare and pick up their kids after school without having to have so much wasted time. So there was a big trade-off to ride transit. You had to be willing to let that trip take so much longer before. And I think this just shows if you make the quality of service even better and you make it convenient, something that rivals, you know, driving in your personal automobile, people will use it.
Yeah, really.
Mike,
So,
let me jump in with. I have
Please.
another question, Bob. I don't want to hog the show here.
please.
But obviously, there's an increase in cost if you're running 2 buses in the same space that you used to run 1. Does the increase in use offset that to a significant enough degree that it's worthwhile? Now, remember, I'm keeping in mind this is a service. It doesn't have to pay for every mile it drives, but at least in my humble opinion. But can you talk a little bit about that? Is it worth the investment for
Yeah.
the ridership service?
Absolutely. And we wouldn't have been able to do this without the support of the City of Manchester. We got grant funding from the Federal Transit Administration, but that has a local match requirement. And Mayor Craig and the full board of mayor and aldermen were incredibly supportive through the entire budget process last year in getting that funding in. And I'm thrilled to share that it's been successful enough that going into this next fiscal year, we're going to keep the doubled frequency. It'll still run every 30 minutes, and we are not seeking an extra dollar at all from the City of Manchester, flat funding. So it's paid for itself, which is what we were hoping for.
So the seed money worked.
Yep, proof of concept
I'm going to
delivered.
say that again because I'm a Democrat. The seed money worked.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. We couldn't have done it without her.
We are strongly supportive Mayor Craig for another term. You know, but you did have this drastic drop-off in ridership, which must have affected your revenues because the fare box is an important, it's not the most important, but it's an important part of your revenues. And how do you overcome that in these difficult times? How do you overcome that and continue to not only maintain your service but to improve it with the revenues dropping off?
So we are very lucky. So when the pandemic first hit and we knew we were having to suspend service, we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to lay off drivers and have them feel that kind of double pinch. We knew we were going to be losing all of the fare box revenue. We also knew that city revenues were taking a hit, and we didn't think it was fair to come to the city and say, okay, we need some extra funding to try to make sure we have drivers when we open service back up. So we turned to our federal partners, and I have got to give so much credit to Congressman Pappas, Senators Shaheen and Hassan. They worked with the folks in D.C. and that original CARES Act funding, that first bill that was passed a year ago, that had enough funding in it for MTA that we were able to cover all of the drivers while they were out, so their health insurance stayed. They kept their 40 hours of pay, so every one of them was able to return in June when we started the service back. And that CARES Act funding also made up for the lost fare box revenue that we had both during the shutdown and because of the lower ridership since we've opened back up.
Yeah.
So we haven't had to go to the city for any extra money. The CARES Act funding has helped us stay open and stay in business.
That makes me think about the new proposal from the Biden administration for a huge support for many sectors of our economy. Is some of that going to come to the benefit of the Transit Authority?
I'm hoping so. They had passed, it's called CRISA in December. That was kind of the second stimulus package that went out. And the transit funding that was in that went almost entirely to just the large urban systems. Your New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago. Nothing came to Manchester. We're okay, but we're hoping that, in this one that's really looking forward to taking us through the end of the pandemic, through vaccine distribution and all of that, that there's something in there for smaller systems like ours.
Very good, very good. Okay, let's see. You already talked about the fact that your ridership did take a hit, but it is bouncing back, right?
Yep, we're about 50% right now. And that's
Really?
where we want to be as long as the social distancing is in place, because we don't want the buses back to having 40 or 50 people in them
No,
at a
you
time.
can't do that anymore. People
Yeah,
would
that's
be
not
comfortable
safe.
with that, and appropriately so.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's
Hey, Mike, can I jump in?
Please do.
Can you do a sales pitch? Tell us what you're doing as far as making the buses a healthy ride. What have you got in place? You briefly talked about sanitizer and some barriers for the drivers. Do you have seats blocked off that people can't sit in? Are you requiring mandatory masks? What's the full safety program that MTA has got in place for their bus riders?
Yep, so we have a mask mandate. All passengers, all employees wear a mask. We have the barriers so that there's an obstruction between you and the driver as you get in and pay the fare. We are rolling out contactless fare payments. You'll be able to pay with your phone starting this summer. We have the buses are defogged and all the contact surfaces wiped down throughout the day, and then they get a deep cleanse every night before they go out and service the next day. We replaced all of the HVAC systems within them and the air filters, making sure that we have good ventilation all the way through. We try to approach it, I've got a 6-year-old daughter, Madison, and she loves the bus. So when we were looking at things, I literally tried to just, okay, as a parent, what would it take for me to feel comfortable bringing her to work and having her ride the bus like she loves to do? And that kind of guided a lot of our decision making.
Yeah.
I find that characterization heartwarming. That you have a daughter who wants to go into the family business, maybe. You know what I mean?
I would be thrilled.
Madison. Okay, well, look for Madison's great future in transportation, public transportation. Let's see. So, last time you were with us, Mike, it was well before we were dealing with the COVID crisis that we're all living through now, and hopefully seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, as the saying goes. But there were some areas that were even you admitted that were underserved in the city of Manchester. Boynton, Goffstown Road, where I live, and you said up around what was the other, up around Campbell.
Yeah.
And oh, wait a minute, let's this is a good time. We have a caller. We're happy to take our caller. Hello, caller. You with us? Hi, caller. You on the air? We're on the progress report.
Yes, I want to ask a question. I'm a senior citizen, and I
Me
used
too.
to take the grocery bus a couple of times a week. A lot of us are talking about it. Is that coming back, or Could you tell me if there's any progress been made by that? A lot of us depend on that and get our prescriptions, our food, etc., and we haven't had that for months and months now. Is there anything going? I'll hang up and listen for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your call. Yeah.
Yeah, so what the caller's referencing, we used to have a grant program for shopper shuttles that provided rides to and from grocery stores. That grant ended, and we weren't able to renew the funding. But what we did was make all of the fixed routes so that they're going to those same places. So you can hop on the Green Dash, it'll bring you right to the front door of Market Basket. Route number 2 goes to the East Side Plaza. So you can still get all of those trips that were made on the shopper shuttle. You can now use the fixed route. And if for some reason the walk to the fixed route bus stop is too far, or you have a disability that makes that difficult, we also have the Step Saver program that'll take you right from your origin to the destination.
Yeah.
So you can still make the trips.
Yeah. You say about the Market Basket, that's obviously the one down on Elm Street, right?
Yep.
And the Green Dash, I think probably most of our viewers know, I hope they all know, the Green Dash is a no-charge service.
Totally free.
Totally free. And how often, what days does it run and how often does it run?
Runs Monday through Friday all week long. Runs from about 9:20 in the morning right through, right now it's ending about 6 o'clock at night. Normally it runs till almost 10 o'clock at night, but we've suspended the evening service because the students aren't there. The Green Dash, really University of New Hampshire down in the Mill Yard, that was the driving force for the evening piece of the ridership.
Yep.
So it just didn't make sense to run an empty bus. I've always promised folks that that would be one thing you would not see MTA doing, is running big empty buses with nobody on them.
Yeah, people don't find that a good visual.
Waste of money.
They think you're wasting money.
They're
It's
right.
not local money, federal money. And that's another thing, you know. Somebody suggested to me, you like to get out and walk on nice days, which I do. Well, try walking around the SNU campus, which I did. It was perfectly delightful. The maintenance is there, is top right. You know, you could go out, but it's weird. There's nobody there.
Right?
And that was one of your major routes, wasn't it? One of your most popular routes was to bring people into town and back from the SNU campus.
Number 5, yeah.
Yeah, is that still operating, or how have you adjusted to that situation?
Yeah, it's still running. So the ridership on that one's down about 65%. So it's pretty low, but we're optimistic that the students will be back hopefully sooner rather than later.
I hope so. It just seems so weird that places.
You know, Bob, I don't have the walking experience, but I encounter the St. Anselm bus practically every other day as I'm driving up toward where I work out in Goffstown, and that bus is still running, but I can only imagine, you know, the campus is pretty quiet these days. But that bus also has some Mass Road component to it, doesn't it, for some shopping?
Yeah, so that bus goes into Penardville along Mass Road. It also serves the Bremer Street corridor through the Kelly Street apartments. So that one's diversified a lot more. It's not as dependent on the campus. It goes through a lot of residential areas. It really is the main West Side connector through that whole central district of the West Side is route number 6.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand is the extent to which, and we talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to talk about it more. The Manchester Transit serves not just the core of Manchester, but surrounding communities. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. I think a lot of people understand that. What is your service to the surrounding towns that make up Greater Manchester, and how do people access that service?
Sure. So when I started 11 years ago, we literally turned around at the city borders. We were Manchester Transit Authority, quite literally. At this point, we now run service in Goffstown, Hooksett, New Boston. We have intercity buses to Concord and Nashua. We absorbed the Cooperative Alliance for Regional Transportation, used to be called CART. We still run that livery, but that's the public transit service in Salem, Derry, Londonderry, Hampstead, Chester. So we are much larger in a geographic footprint, and all of that service is connected. So, you know, if you board in Manchester, you can buy a day pass for $5. That will get you up to Concord. You can run your errands there. You can then take the bus all the way down to Nashua with that same day pass, kind of integrating all of that together so that you don't have to be on a bunch of different buses with different companies and paying different fare sets. Wanting to make it really easy because people don't just need to access things in Manchester. They have medical appointments and shopping and family that are over the borders. So,
did you mention Bedford in that? I don't think you mentioned Bedford.
no, we do not have any service in Bedford. It's kind of one of
Why
the
is
last
that?
communities. So one of the things that we really stress is we think it's important to expand transit access to as many communities as we can, but we think that the towns need to provide that level of local support. All of these service expansions I've talked about are fully funded without needing any money from City of Manchester taxpayers. So each
That
town
was going to
pays
be my
for their own.
question, Mike.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I wanted to jump in on that. I'm a Manchester guy. I try not to be a hometowner, but Manchester bears a large burden of regional services. And I'm really glad to hear that in exchange for the service that we're providing to the region, we're getting some direct compensation. Can you elaborate on that? As you know, does it actually pay the full boat of what we're providing? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, actually, it works in the reverse from most things around here. It saves Manchester some funding. Goffstown, for example, pays all of the costs for their Goffstown demand response service. That runs Monday through Friday from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon.
And just so people know, demand response means there's no scheduled service, but you can call up
Yep, reservation based.
and you will have a Manchester Transit bus of some sort
Yep.
provide your service.
Yeah, it's a better method for delivering service in smaller towns because there's just not enough population to warrant running a bus up and down the street every day over and over again. This way, we're sending the vehicle whenever there's a need, but if there's not demand, we're not running that empty bus. And since Goffstown is paying all of the costs for that service, that includes the variable cost, the fuel, the driver, that type of stuff, but also their component of the overhead. There's still only one me. We haven't added, extra management staff with any of this stuff. There's still one finance officer, there's one assistant director. So all of that overhead, our utility bills, things like that, now get divided by more stakeholders.
Yeah.
So Manchester's piece is a little bit smaller.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. As I recall, as a Goffstown native, Manchester, Goffstown was pretty tight with its tax money, as people are generally in New Hampshire. But they're willing to support you with some tax dollars from Goffstown?
Yep, Goffstown, the town pays cash match. So does Hooksett, so does New Boston. So it's not
Oh, you
in
go to New
kind.
Boston too?
Yeah, we have service in New Boston.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people knew about this. So I'm really glad to reemphasize it. If we talked about it before, really glad to have to clear it up that we have this.
Can
Go
I
ahead,
expand
Mike.
on that a little bit too? You talked about running the transit services down in Salem and south of Manchester, and I think you mentioned you still run the old livery. So it to the people in Salem, it looks like the old bus company. It's just now operated by Manchester Transit Authority. Am I understanding that right?
Exactly. Yep. Our goal during the merger was to make it so that passengers didn't even know what happened. It was all supposed to be a behind the scenes. Ideally, things run a little smoother. We've seen now that it's been over a year since we've had that merger. That was in October of 2019. So we've been able to improve some of the service hours and the frequencies. So hopefully they've noticed that piece. But the bus is still blue and white, says card on the side.
Why was that done? Why was that done? I don't want to look a good thing, criticize a good thing, but what was how does that benefit Manchester and our ability to have a top-notch transit authority? I understand how it makes the transit authority better, but how does it benefit the city of Manchester in the transit world?
Yeah, so the reason that we did it, CART, when it existed on its own before the merger, was a nonprofit. So they were doing the best they could, but it was a small system. It only had 5 vehicles, and it had an executive director just like MTA does. But it's really difficult to manage a system that's that small because you still have vehicle insurance, you still have all of the liability, you have the fuel, the need for drivers. But you don't have the economies of scale that something like Manchester does. I've got 125 buses in my fleet, so I can get better pricing on fuel. I can leverage insurance companies against each other to save some money on the premiums. We had been wanting to expand that regional footprint. That's why we did things like Goffstown and Hooksett. But to me, it made more sense to merge with this nonprofit who already was established in the community rather than have MTA try to go and compete against them. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't want to, harm somebody. The idea is to expand access and get more people connected. And now all of these communities, because it's through MTA, they can access, businesses here in Manchester. They can come work up here. They can go to the medical appointments up here. it allows Manchester to serve more of an anchor role within that whole southern New Hampshire tier. We have intercity service to Nashua, but just to exit 6 where that Kohl's and Christmas tree shop is. We don't go into kind of downtown. So it's a bit of a competitive advantage for Manchester because that's where most of the access is. So if you want to access, a lot of shopping and medical and education, you're coming up here. You're not going to Nashua.
Okay, Mike, I'm gonna press a little bit. I'm almost convinced. I'm almost there. I need you to bring me home.
All right.
I can understand the service, as someone in Manchester who needs to get up to Concord, maybe to Concord Orthopedics or something like that, to an appointment. I can take the bus, and then I could head down to the Christmas tree shop and do some shopping. I understand the convenience for Manchester. But the state of New Hampshire is really cheap. And it seems to me that to provide a nice regional transportation service for the people of Salem, that's the state's role. Why, and as successful as it is, why do you feel that it's important for Manchester to step in and do something that maybe the state should be doing?
So I think one of the things for us that kind of gets missed, we are the public transit authority for the Manchester urbanized area. So we're not a city department. I don't work for City of Manchester. We're an autonomous entity, and our responsibility as the public transit provider extends beyond Manchester. I mean, there are dozens of towns in the urbanized area. So we try to meet everybody's, but in a way that doesn't put Manchester on the hook. I want to get service into the smaller towns, but I need to make sure that it's done in a way that's financially sustainable without depending on Manchester footing the bill for everybody.
Well, you brought me home. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that explanation.
So another question I was ready to explore with you, Mike Whitten, that is that I understand in Nashua they do have some city service for their buses on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have no service on Sundays. Is that something you could think you should remedy, or why is that?
It's on our radar. We've looked at several different scenarios for where we think the next expansion of fixed route service will leverage the most ridership. We want the most bang for our buck. And right now it's still frequency. That South Willow improvement to 30-minute service has shown us what can happen. And I'm even more encouraged about, what I think it'll do a year or two from now when we get past all of the pandemic impacts.
May it be so.
On Saturday, we've run Saturday service, for a couple of decades at this point, and it's only pulling, before COVID, it was pulling maybe 800 people a day across all 12 routes.
Mm-hmm.
It's even weaker demand on a Sunday. It just doesn't bring home the number of people extra weekday service.
But there are people to whom that service is extremely important. They may not be as numerous, but they're extremely important for people that maybe need something to get somewhere to do something on Sundays, and we don't serve them.
Well, and that's why. So I'm the vice chair of something called the Region 8-9 Coordination Council, and our mission there is to connect people with different providers, because that need for transportation exists, even if, like you said, it's in a small volume.
It's a small number, but the need
But that's where our partners like Easter Seals New Hampshire or volunteer driver programs like Caregivers, they can step in and meet those smaller demands where there's not enough people to warrant full-scale public transit, but you still want to make sure that they can get to those vital services that they need too.
Yeah. I'm really interested that you're continuing to provide service to Concord and Nashua. Which is really interesting because, when the legislature pretty much shut down in Concord, that was one of your I don't remember where you stopped in Concord, but I know it was right in front of the State House.
Mm-hmm.
Is there still a demand for that service in Concord and I guess in Nashua too?
Yeah, so both Nashua and Concord have been fairly resistant to a lot of the impacts. They're only down about 30%. And I think a lot of that is because the trips are made more for commuting. So those are folks going up there for work. So it's not as prone to things when it's more education or recreation, people are kind of not doing that stuff right now. You still got to go to work. So
yeah. Let's turn over and look at the situation with the school district. As I said, you've been fairly unique. I don't know if there's any other system in New Hampshire that operates the city transit, or in this case, city area transit, also operates the school buses, which you do. And, we've had our problems with the schools here. How's that going?
Yeah, there's only 3 or 4 like us in the country. There are no other ones in New Hampshire. It's
Okay.
incredibly unique. From a transportation side, I have nothing but glowing remarks for the district. We work closely with Assistant Superintendent Jen Gillis and their transportation coordinator Kelly Hebert O'Brien, and I can't imagine how difficult it has been for them, going to full remote, then going back to hybrid, then kind of switching back
Oh,
and
yeah.
doing these things.
Oh, yeah.
And they've been such great
nightmare.
partners. As every change, every grade they brought back is an entirely different route set for school buses, because now you've got a different population and different places that you need to go, and they haven't missed a beat. So even though they've got so much on their plate, whenever we needed something, we needed to get together and iron out some details, they've been there for us. So.
And when are these school buses really going to start rolling again, do you think?
We're rolling. We run 32 buses a day right now.
You do?
So we normally run 65, so a little under half, but
Yeah, one of the nice things I saw the other day as I was driving into town from Goffstown Road was a school bus coming the other way, and it stopped, and the signs went out, and the red lights flashed,
Yep.
and they discharged the kid. I said, "That's really nice. I like to see that."
hopefully it was one of our propane buses.
I hope it was.
Yeah, look for the green bird.
Let's talk about that now. We all know that we have a climate crisis. Well, most of us know, I think, and everybody should know, we have a climate crisis that's affecting our world and our nation in so many ways. And transportation is now a big part of that issue. As a guy who's been involved in energy issues for decades, I always thought the electric sector was the big polluter for climate. Today, it's transportation has overtaken the electric sector as the major source of carbon emissions into the air. And so, I want to ask you about, where's the Manchester Transit Authority figuring out how to meet their emissions goals of, cutting down on, because you have diesel buses.
Yeah, so we've started on the school side. We have 14 right now, and we have on order another 5 propane school buses. So those have been kind of a first step. School, I think, will be in propane probably for another 10 years at least. School buses are really difficult to get an ROI on all electric. They just don't run enough. They only run a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon, and it's
Yeah.
only 9 months a year. On the transit side, I see much more potential for all electric. So we've just wrapped up a fleet replacement. We're expecting our last buses to be delivered this summer. Those are biodiesel, so we've taken kind of a step away from traditional diesel. And our eye is on 2029 when we start the next round of replacement. And what I would like to do is replace the fleet with entirely electric buses at that point. I think the technology will have advanced enough and the cost will have come down enough to make it viable here.
Are there other transit systems that are operating electric buses now?
Oh yeah, there's tons of them. Most of them are much larger, so they have that capital, ability.
Yeah.
Boston's got buses. If you've been on the Silver Line, so when they're in the tunnels underneath, they put the cables up, and that runs entirely electric. There's no
Yeah,
emissions
yeah.
at all from that.
Glad to be like
I was going to mention that in Europe you see a lot of these articulated buses running on a catenary system. They don't need the batteries. They run straight. They're fed by the system. Is that just an old-fashioned system that's never coming back, or what is the future of electric public transportation? What's it look like?
Yeah, I think batteries are definitely the solution here. Running that catenary wire from the beginning, with it not being an existing infrastructure, is just so expensive, and a lot of people don't like the eyesore. It's not super pretty, but battery technology is coming a long
you can
way.
pretend you're in Paris,
Right? Yeah. Have
Mike,
a baguette.
we're
Look at
going to
some
go
wires.
back to where we came from. Manchester Traction, the trolley system.
Right.
That's what they operate on, electricity. I was mentioning to Mike here that, the public service company in New Hampshire originated as Manchester Traction because the trolley cars needed electricity to operate their system. And that's why public service ended up operating the city buses for many, many years, including a service to Goffstown where I grew up. And I remember boarding public service company buses to go to Manchester. And that's where it all came from. And it's kind of going back to, in a sense, it's kind of going back to that, isn't it? If we get back to electric transit. Yeah. What do you think? What are you looking for the future of your system and the future of transit in cities like Manchester generally? Where do you think we're going to go, and how are we going to get there?
So you alluded to it kind of at the beginning of the discussion tonight, but I think rail is one of the biggest missing pieces right now.
Amen.
I think we've seen that with Amazon's, search for their second HQ and how that was a non-negotiable requirement. If we're going to be able to attract businesses and attract the employees that those businesses need, we need to start meeting the demands that those younger folks have. Will Stewart's done a couple of presentations I have loved. He's the executive director of Stay Work Play, New Hampshire.
Yes, and an alderman as well.
Yes, alderman for Ward 2.
Yep.
And that guy knows his numbers. He's able to demonstrate it in an easy to understand way. We are losing population. New Hampshire is the second oldest state in the entire country.
Right.
Second only to Maine. That's not a great sustainable path to be on with regard to economic development. We've got to change that before, you're too deep into the hole.
Yeah.
And I think rail is a big piece of that. You don't have to have Boston as this negative. Boston could be a great selling point. It's not that far away. But if you got to sit in a 4-lane highway and just go 15 miles an hour to get to it, that's not good enough. You've got to have a real connection to the city.
I think people forget about the people that may want to come to Manchester that
That's
would
two
like to be
ways.
able to use their time productively instead of holding onto a steering wheel, watching the car in front of them to come to a halt. Those are the people.
Not to mention, Bob, airport access.
Yep.
If they had a station right down in my ward, Ward 8, down at the airport, people flying into Manchester, hop on the train, come right downtown to where our new fantastic intermodal train station is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, I wanted to ask, what do you see a role at all for Manchester Transit Authority in the rail service to Manchester? Not only just connecting to it, but maybe having a role in the experience of it. Maybe having some role in the development of the station, what it looks like, operation of it, or are you guys going to just stand back and let others take care of that?
No. Our vision is to have the multimodal station be an asset of MTA, probably through a shared partnership. Usually the tracks and platform are owned by the rail provider, most likely to be the T. But then the building, all of the bus bays, the interior waiting, all of that would be ideally MTA's. It's why we don't have a bus station right now. So our hub, all of our routes start and end downtown, and it's from Veterans Park and across the street. So you're out on the sidewalks all winter long. It's not ideal by any means, but we have resisted building something there because we believe rail to be inevitable, and I don't want to spend millions of dollars on a bus station that's then not where the train is going to come. And it doesn't make sense to me to do that.
Do you have any sites in mind? I know for a while that Raytheon site where the Market Basket is, and it would have been beautiful, was considered. It's in an old rail yard. It was considered as a spot for an intermodal transportation location. Are there other sites maybe south of that, down by the gas house? What sites do you think might be amenable to that?
Yeah, so the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission just wrapped up a study looking at that. So they came up with 3 different site alternatives for a multimodal station. One of them is actually down where we are. We're actually on Elm Street. People don't really think about that, but all 128 of my buses are at 110 Elm Street. So we are an abutter to the rail line. So you could do it, kind of a mixing of some of the property lines, but there's space there to do it in an existing right-of-way that wouldn't require, ideally you put it right downtown, but downtown is so developed, I think it's really difficult to purchase the number of lots that you're going to need. And what are you going to do with Canal Street? Just kind of like the traffic impacts, I think, are really difficult. And a lot of people have talked about wanting to redevelop South Elm. Nothing's going to work better than sticking the multimodal facility in that part of the city. That's going to spur economic development all around it.
And make that the center of downtown.
Exactly.
Push the south end even further than currently planned.
Yeah, there's no reason it can't go all the way down to Queen City. Let's have it be, larger and more vibrant than it is even now.
It's exciting things to think about. It really is.
Yeah.
What are some? You said there were 3. What were the other 2 locations? I understand you might be biased toward your own house, but what were a couple of the other locations?
Yeah, one was centrally located, kind of where MUR is.
Well, that was the train station once
Yeah.
upon a time.
Yeah, so I think that was a natural kind of starting point, and I believe that was the preferred location that the study found, but they didn't take into account, in my opinion, some of the acquisition costs. I mean, yeah, it would be great if everybody would just turn over the land, but that's pretty densely developed down there. And then the other was north up by the Amoskeag Bridge, kind of the alternative to developing the south. Well, what if you did North Elm Street and up there?
There's an old train station up there, which is now private residence up not too far from there too.
Like, what's old is new. There you go.
Yeah, it could be. Well, very good. You know, it's really interesting to me, and I think probably a lot of people didn't realize this CART program you talked about with these towns, including Salem and Chester. My goodness, I did not realize that. Do you see that expanding further? Do you think the Manchester Transit could go even further beyond the city itself in providing service and opportunities for people to have transportation?
Yeah, I mean, our regional efforts, you know, I'm pleased with where they're at. I think if another town, we've had some discussions with some other of the kind of rural towns around us, we would be open to it, but we're really focused, our priority the next few years is on increasing the frequency of our core service. But I see, you know, you look at Maryland, you look at Rhode Island, there are multiple states who have one transit authority, and then it's kind of that central clearinghouse for everything. I think as long as you're willing to be creative and right-size the transit service with the community that it's serving, and not have it be one of those, well, okay, MTA says it's going to be this way, so this is what you've got. You got to listen to those
Yeah.
local stakeholders and craft something that fits both within their budget and within their demand. I think it could work. I think there's definitely an opportunity to move east, ideally. I think the big elephant in New Hampshire has always been east-west bus service, connecting Manchester
Yeah.
and Portsmouth.
Which at one time we did, but not recently.
Yep. So.
Yeah. So I'm sure you want to know what your the people that use your services, your passengers, are doing. Are you taking surveys? What do they think are the major problems? What do they want to see most in the future?
So we try to do a little better than surveys. I think nothing beats getting out there and talking to them face to face. So all of our staff make a conscious effort to dedicate some of our time every week to get out there, whether we're driving or just riding on the bus, talking to people at the bus stops, wanting to hear, you know, little stuff, having discussions over the last couple of weeks with the cutouts through the snowbanks.
Yeah.
So as the weather
Oh, yeah.
warmed and cold and froze and warmed and froze, it kind of
that's a
melted
problem.
in and then turned it, it's like concrete now.
Yeah.
And it's narrowed a little bit, so
a
that
lot
if
of
you
your
board,
people, a lot of people are like me, elderly,
yeah,
and very concerned about that sort of
yeah,
thing. Yeah,
it
sure.
could be hard to squeeze through. So hearing that feedback and knowing that okay, we can work with our contractor and maybe widen those in the beginning, so that if it does do some of that melt freeze, and the path narrows, it still doesn't impact their ability to safely get on and off the bus.
In your job as the executive director of the Manchester Transit Authority, I imagine you go probably to a lot of conferences and hear presentations from people that operate systems, you know, for communities like ours in size and demographics. What are the major things you learned from this? What are the major things you'd like to see happen to our system from the best practices you've heard about?
I do, yeah. So I'm the New England board member for a group called the Community Transportation Association of America. It's basically transit's version of small cities and rural systems.
Yeah.
So it's not there for the Los Angeleses, it's there for the Manchesters,
Yeah.
so that we can all learn from each other. I by no means think that I have all the best ideas. So in a perfect world, I'd love to poach the idea from somebody else who's already gone through all the growing pains and
Yeah.
pitfalls, learn what didn't work for them, avoid making those mistakes, and just launch it successfully to begin with. But it's about building those relationships. One thing that I'm excited about here, Missoula, Montana, another similar sized city to us, another northern climate city, they partnered their transit system with the Chamber of Commerce, and they have private sector funding that stepped in and has supplanted the fare box. So their system went totally fare-free.
Sort of like we did with the Green Dash, right?
Yep, so imagine the Green
Which I
Dash
guess
on
the Chamber of
everything.
Commerce was very instrumental in making that happen for Manchester. Is that right?
Yeah, that was a three-way project, the Chamber and then the city's parking division.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well, that's really great. So in 10 years, if everything came to wish as you would hope it would, what would our system look like?
I think it'd be fare-free and running every 15 to 30 minutes.
7 days a week?
How about hourly on the weekends, but running 7 days a week?
Okay. Let's see. What else I got here? God, I don't know. I'll kind of run through my schedule of things here to talk about. Have you got more things you'd like to tell us about, Mike, about what your life is like, how this is, and you're still enjoying the job and you want to keep doing it, I guess? It seemed like you were very enthusiastic.
Oh, Lord, yes. Yeah, I love it. I'm from Western Mass, but I came to Manchester 2007 for a 2-week assignment,
Yeah.
and I've never left. This is the place I've chosen. I got married here, had my kids here, hope to be here for decades more to come. One of the things that I think is kind of timely right now is looking at vaccine distribution. I think.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Can you help people get to their vaccines at SNU or wherever that may be, wherever they set up future vaccine sites? That is definitely something a lot of people would be interested in. They
Yeah,
want
I
to get
think
those vaccines.
we can play a big role in that. We've actually hosted 2 of them already. So we've done drive-through vaccine distribution at MTA. Because I got this giant garage, big enough to hold all of our buses, but during the day, they're all out on the road. They're not there, so it's an indoor location set up perfectly for drive-throughs. You can push a couple hundred people through there every day. And the health departments come down, and we've done that twice so far. I'm hoping we'll keep building on that. Right now, my understanding is the big holdback is vaccine. There's just not enough vaccine right now.
So you're ready to provide vaccinations right at your garage,
we can do it right there.
right down on South Elm.
Yeah, and then we can, if people don't have the ability to drive down,
Not
Transit's
bad.
a no-brainer, in my opinion, a way to connect them with it.
Yeah. How about just getting people to the other vaccine site? Like, I guess you do have service up to SNU right now. That's continuing. So, but if you get up there, I mean, see, I've been up there. I thought I was going to get a shot, but I didn't succeed. But apparently, everybody there's in their own private vehicle.
Right.
If you come in by bus, can you go through and have the National Guard process you and get your shot if you arrive and leave by Manchester Transit?
I don't believe so right now.
Yeah.
If you have to get a ride somehow in a private vehicle, the way that one is set up. They have been doing a lot of distribution on site, so they'll go to some of the senior living communities, they go to the nursing homes for people that can't drive. They'll bring the vaccine right to them. So
they
I think
will.
yeah, it'll be a mixed approach. The health department has been doing just a Herculean effort. I don't know where Anna Thomas finds the time.
They are heroes. I tell
Yeah.
you, Anna Franks and Phil Alexakos, we've had him on here several times, and I just a total admiration for the hours and the commitment that he puts in every day on behalf of the citizens of our city. It's just remarkable.
If there's anything I can do to take just a small load off their shoulders, we're here and ready to do it.
Right.
We're right now in the middle of a kind of an extraordinary vaccination situation where large scale sites are needed, and the fact that Manchester facility, I saw the portable sign up and running, vaccination site on one of the days you were doing that, and I thought it was a great idea because it's designed for traffic. It's got large overhead doors. You drive right through. But we're going to get to a point where this is just a flu shot. And at that point, the Manchester Transit Authority is going to be able to get people to their Rite Aid or to their Walgreens or to their healthcare provider where they can pick up their shot. Right now, it might not be the best fit for transportation, but the time's going to come when it's going to be much more ordinary, and they will ordinarily provide that kind of service.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So is there anything that I've left out that you want to talk about, Mike, that I haven't brought up about the Transit Authority and its problems and its service to the community?
I think we've covered it.
Okay. All right. We usually don't run out of time this early, but I think we've covered an awful lot of stuff. I have a few things I might like to talk about other than transit. I don't know about you, Mike.
Well, I'm like a laser focused on transit right now. I spent 2.5 hours preparing for the show. I hope my questions. My tongue's in my cheek. I'm just kidding. But I think that we need to embrace the Transit Authority as a community. It provides an extraordinary service, and every time Mike comes on, we learn that there's more, and it's growing and it's dynamic. And I think us, I drive my car sometimes the bus gets in my way in traffic, and I think we need to think about it a little bit differently as a real asset, as something that makes the city great. With a city that doesn't have buses running up and down its streets is weaker.
It's a
doesn't
community.
provide to its citizens.
It's something that knits the community together without a doubt, and I think that's a very good point, Mike. It really is an important thing, and I think the Manchester Transit Authority is very fortunate to have your leadership, Mike, with all that you've done and all that you've achieved, and you got lots more to do. I know. I mean, just to learn about the extent of what the service provides to the adjoining towns, to Nashua, to Concord, and then this CART program with these other cities, these other surrounding towns. It makes me think of the Waterworks, which is now beginning to provide service to some of these same towns that you're providing, transportation services to, from our source at Lake Massabesic and now the Merrimack River. It's the same kind of thing. Manchester really is so important to the state of New Hampshire, not just because it's the largest city.
These are symbols of greatness. These are symbols of greatness. These are the things that back in the 1800s, when the city of Manchester was getting started, they said, by golly, we're going to have a library, we're going to have museums, we're going to have theaters, we're going to have attraction service that gets people around, we're going to have some pride in our community. We're not going to do everything on the cheap and give as little as possible to our citizens, despite what some aldermen might want to do. We're gonna be a real city and provide the same. I don't know how else to say it, but when you live in a city, you come to expect certain things. And transportation service is one of them, and rail service is one of them, and we should have it.
We should have it, no doubt about it. And when we get our students back, because Manchester is a college town, we get our students back at your alma mater, St. Anselm. We get our students back to SNU. They are a big part of the transit demand, are they not? And they can. I believe you still have all your buses. You can put their bicycles on the front and take them where they want to go, and then they can bicycle to their particular drop-off spot or wherever they want to end their journeys. And we hope those days are coming back real soon. What is the demographic of the Manchester Transit rider typically? I know certainly a lot of elderly people use it. For which case your kneeling buses and the things you do to help people with some mobility issues is very, very important. But it's also very important to our younger people, particularly our college students, is it not? And that's a big part of what you're doing.
Yeah, so we have about 20% of our ridership is seniors, mostly going for medical appointments. About 20% of the ridership is students, and our overwhelming share, 60%, are commuters, people going to and from work. So
Really?
Predominantly, that's most of what we do.
I don't know as many people know that, but that seems right, sure.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
and if you think about it, work is one of those things, most people go 5 days a week. So
Yeah.
even if you ride for medical appointments or something like that, hopefully you're not going to the doctor 5 days.
Hopefully not.
Yep.
Yeah. And, that's probably where you're really, with the students too, but probably really taking it because so many people are not, going to work anymore. They're either maybe not working because the businesses have closed in many places, or because they're, working remotely.
Yeah.
So then they maybe a section of your ridership you won't get back anytime for quite a while.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately for us, it's more that first one. So we don't have a lot of kind of white collar folks who are working remotely now that we're riding transit to commute.
Oh, really?
Our demographics skew more towards people who maybe don't have a car available. It's a lot of hourly working, people in a lot of retail and food service. And those two sectors that just get clobbered right now. You see how many businesses are struggling. And unfortunately, it's people who aren't making those trips because they don't have those jobs right now.
Yeah. By the way, I noticed, I just been noticing recently, it's probably not that recent, but it seems like the bike share program that was often running to such a great effect in Manchester is not working anymore. Is that true? Do you know?
I don't know. I haven't.
I just don't see the bikes outside of the Hampshire Plaza. Well, the big tower, and right by City Hall, and up at the Puritan, and these places that had these bikes available for grab a bike and go. I don't see them there. Maybe they'll come back when the weather's warm, right?
Yeah, April may be
I
telling.
certainly hope so.
Yeah, it may be a
it is
seasonal
winter
piece
time
right now.
after all, but with the COVID, I'm not sure. Okay. Well, very good. Okay. Hey, Mike, I wanted to mention something. I don't know if you saw what happened up in the legislature today.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that you could talk about in the remaining minutes. I mean, the complete shutdown of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yep.
The
Yep.
politicization of human illness, and then not to mention now that they got that done, what they did with it. So, yeah.
Well, I was thinking about the vote they had to say anybody that paid a fine for not complying with the COVID
Yeah.
mask requirements, the fine will be forgiven as soon as the emergency's over. I can't believe that. That just strikes me as absolutely shocking. Anyway, I'm not there anymore, but today was quite something, I tell you.
Well, I guess the argument was a compassionate argument that businesses certainly have taken a hit. But the point that I think was missed is the one that Phil Alexakos made last week. If you were bad enough to be fined, you were pretty darn bad.
Yeah, they don't hand out the
really
fine
had to be
without
a
a
bad
lot of
guy.
negotiation and trying to get to an agreement.
Yeah,
That's
so
for sure.
I wonder if those are the kind of people that you want to reward their bad behavior.
Yeah.
But we know what we're dealing with. I don't want to get too deep in the political weeds. I can get fired up, and Mike has done such a great job. I don't want to smear him with politics.
He has indeed.
And of course, also in his position, he cannot upset any politicians because
Well, transit is one of those last remaining issues that's truly bipartisan.
I hope so.
I've done 11 budgets with the city, and we've had 11 unanimous votes to fund us.
Well, that's
I'm glad to
a
hear
great
that, Mike.
achievement,
That's
and you
good
deserve a
news.
lot
Yeah.
of credit for
It
that.
reaches across the aisle. Our
'Cause
support's
a lot
come
of
from both
places,
sides.
there was a time when there was a lot of bipartisan rant over whether we should, support continued passenger rail through Amtrak in this country. I'm not hearing that so much anymore. I do think that that's a success, and we should just mention in closing, I guess, that your system is much more energy efficient than the private automobile.
Sure.
Absolutely, and rail is too. I mean, we want to cut down on our carbon emissions. When you get to your all-electric buses, that'll be a huge win. But even before then, the people that are riding your buses are not driving their own cars. They're all helping on our combating, increasing our carbon emissions, which is so bloody important for us in this world as we go ahead. It's a crisis that's we just don't seem to pay enough attention to somehow, but it's really there. And I'm happy to say you're a part of the solution. Mike, it's been really great of you to come down and join us. We really appreciate having you here, and I'm sure we'll have you back, and I'm glad you're going to stay on the job.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to
Okay.
spread the word.
Good to see you, Mike.
Take care, Mr.
All right.
Charlie. We'll see you next week. It'll be me with Lou D'Alessandro next week, and Mike will not be available, but I'll be on with Lou.